think I'm stuck a little bit with the writing because I feel I have a story in my head that I want to write. I just don't have the motivation to write that because I only have like a snippet of a scene or a few scenes for this story. So in my mind, I feel it's like short story vibes. I don't have the confidence to feel that I can put it into an entire novel. It's like the fear of not hitting the word count that is stopping me from starting to write it. And I know once I actually start writing it, then the characters will get more familiar to me and the plot line will uproar itself. It's just actually getting myself to sit down and to start writing.
I understand. I mean, as a discovery writer, that's usually all I have to go off of. But if that feeling lasts too long, like if I'm going along and I'm going page 50, page 60, and I don't know where the story's going, then I need to either figure out where this is going or I need to stop because, by then you should know at least the stakes and stuff for your character.
Exactly.
So today I'm doing hot chocolate. It seemed like a hot chocolate type of day.
Ooh, okay, so today I am doing a vanilla matcha latte. I don't generally like matcha because it tastes like grass to me, but I have kind of getting fond of like the vanilla matcha latte. And I have this nice little cup that I got from my friend today.
Oh, that's so cute. I like the little triangles.
I know, and the theme, the color theme blends with my whole living room kitchen area. So two flies with one swat. Alrighty, are we ready for this episode?
I am ready.
Hey ho, let's go. Welcome to Tea and Tales. We are happy to have you here with us. I'm Madeline now.
And I'm Sarah Sampson. We especially want to thank Brits in the Library and Danny the Dreamer for following us on social media and tuning in each week. This week, we are going to jump into classroom innovations, ways that parents and teachers can help young readers develop in their language and better reading skills. And we have special guest Patty McGee coming to talk to us about this very specific topic. So please welcome Patty McGee.
Welcome, Patty. We are so excited to have you here with us, and especially because this season we do focus on children and middle grade and young adult novels. And it doesn't mean that it always has to be fiction. And so I feel the topic that we are going to be discussing today, which is about classroom innovations and how you can incorporate writing and grammar into the classroom, is so important for especially teachers and educators. So tell us a little bit more about you, about your job, about the work that you are doing, and how you kind of got into it.
Sure. Gosh, my teaching life has been unconventional, I think is the right word. I started as a classroom teacher in the town I grew up in, and my first grade teacher was my principal. So she taught me to read and she taught me how to teach. It's a full circle moment. And I became a school librarian because I adore books and I have almost an addiction to matching books to readers, young and old. With that, I became an instructional coach in the school that I was in. And from there, it just kind of grew because part of being an instructional coach was modeling certain things in the classroom, demoing different techniques, different materials, that sort of thing. But it kept me teaching. Now I do this as my own business where I call myself a traveling teacher, somebody who goes into schools to help make teachers' jobs just a bit easier. And I'm usually teaching in the classrooms as well. And so there were problems of practice for me that I found were pretty universal. One was giving feedback to writers. It was always correction. That's time consuming. And that just simply doesn't work either. Rewriting the corrections from what the teacher has fixed for you doesn't teach you how to do that better the next time. My first book was on feedback in writing. I feel like I've figured out that part of my practice that felt problematic. And then I started tackling the beast that has been everyone's challenge everywhere. And that is learning grammar. I tried so many different approaches. I trusted the ones that were used when I was taught, but I then also didn't trust them because I couldn't remember grammar. And whenever I used it in like those worksheets and fill in the blanks and memorizing parts of speech, it didn't work. It did work, I'm going to say, for a small percentage of learners. For teachers, there's a small percentage of us who feel really confident with our grammar knowledge and know how, but most of us don't, which means that the approach we're using that was also used when we were kids and when our parents were kids and when our grandparents were kids, I've traced it back generations of the same instructional approach. I had to do something about it in my mind, because if it wasn't going to be just like for me, I knew that there's only one other approach out there that I feel adequately does the job of grammar instruction. And it was certainly my inspiration. It's called Patterns of Power. Yet I did want more and created an approach to grammar instruction that I hope is delightful. And that's how I got to where I am. The best endorsement I have had for my latest book, which is called Not Your Granny's Grammar, is when I was in a 7th grade classroom and I was demoing for teachers, and I explained to the students that I was going to be sharing different ways of teaching grammar, something different than the old way. And when I was leaving, one of the boys in the class said, "That was so much better than the old way." Yes. So that I feel like I have slayed the beast in some way, because it has been a big challenge for most educators. And I want to say, I've been talking to a lot of authors too. Knowing and using grammar or misusing grammar intentionally has been very challenging.
I love how you took that inspiration of this is missing and we need something innovative here to not just revamp the whole idea of how to teach grammar and how to teach writing to children, but also to make sure that the teachers understand the processes that you're trying to implement. You're not just throwing out a theory. You've tested those theories in the classroom with teachers, with real students. So if I was a teacher approaching your work for the first time, where would you suggest I started?
So I think the place to start is a mind shift. We don't know most of the time an alternative, or that there could be an alternative. There's so many ways of thinking that have been solidified in, I think, everyone's minds about grammar, particularly. That number one, if you don't know grammar, you're not smart. Like, that is a problem. That is a big problem. And that certain types of grammar are superior to others, that's also a problem. That is not true. I'd also want to support the mind shift of, we don't need to learn grammar in one little like pop and then apply it. Like, okay, identify nouns. Oh, now write with nouns. It's just like there's no space. There's no like elbow room to really look at grammar instruction so that it has actually some breathing space to develop. I'd also want us to create a mindset around grammar being the art of writing. That grammar, when used or misused intentionally, is something that is akin to a painter's paintbrush or a sculptor's chisel. It is how we create meaning, and it's that kind of sophistication. It's not just a static set of rules. It really is the art of the author.
I love that. And I love how you talk about mindset, because the amount of things you can achieve if your mindset is just correct. English is not my first language. And so when I was growing up, we had English as a second language, where you would learn tenses, you would learn like poems, and you would write essays and all those things. This is why I put my hand over my eyes, because I felt like you were eyeing me, because as when I was learning English, I was honestly just learning it because I was like, I need to pass my grade. And so I learned all of it like a parrot. because I was like, okay, this is the exam. I need to write this right down. And if it is finished, then all of it disappeared. Not knowing I would become a writer one day and would bite me in the butt one day. My mindset was like, no, I'm just going to write my story. And that is what proofreaders are for, so that they can fix all my mistakes. Go put all the amount of Oxford commas that you want to put into my novel. For someone like me, who has that kind of mindset in the sense that, I mean, I don't need to learn this because someone else can just do it for me. Like, what would you say to that?
I would say that that's the equivalent of, say, an artist starting a sketch and not actually adding color to it. It's fully yours. And while we love our copy editors because they are so needed, the book we just wrote on grammar, I wrote with somebody that knows more about grammar than I'll ever know. And he, of course, proofed the book multiple times, and our copy editor still had lots to say. But really, when we think of grammar as our voice, our style, that we're turning over then to someone else.
I feel like you just stabbed me in the heart a little bit. Now I have to go sit in the corner and think about what I have done in my life.
Let me also say that I think that one of the biggest challenges with grammar is this sense of shame. There's so much about grammar that it feels punitive, that when we write, it's corrected to oblivion, and it's usually just grammar that's corrected. When we speak, when we know grammar and we're walking around with t-shirts that say, I'm silently correcting your grammar, or grammar police, and it just really sets a tone of shame. And I don't want to do that.
Let me just say that as a person who has dyslexia in her family and just a touch of the dyslexia, I've been quite interested in your processes because you focus on things like that. And I love you said that it's your voice, that the way you use your grammar is your voice. And you've also said the way you use it and intentionally misuse it. And I feel like I unintentionally misuse it sometimes, but when people try to correct it, I think, no, but that is my voice. That is the voice that's in my head. I just need to know when that sentence got so away from the norm that it's confusing the majority of the readers, so I can reel it back and edit it into something more understandable, but still my voice. I would really love to hear how your experiences as an educator in developing these books and knowing these things you just told us, how did that affect the way you decided to write your books, the voice in your books and the structure?
Yeah, we really wanted to make sure that we lowered the temperature on grammar, learning, and instruction. Not everyone knows grammar, and we wanted our tone to be one of acceptance and almost humorous. We have memes throughout the book that we just crack up with. Like Jim Gaffigan, the comedian, once said, when you are correcting someone's grammar, remember nobody likes you. So we really try to set the tone of playfulness, of lightheartedness. You're all included here in this book, and also give a little bit of perspective on grammar over the years, the history of grammar. When we think about grammar, we're often thinking about that it's static, that it has been the same for all of the centuries. And in fact, it has evolved a lot. Back in, let's say, the 16th century, people wrote, well, first of all, with like completely different syntax than we use today. But they also would capitalize the words in the sentence they felt were most important, the ones they wanted to emphasize. And we obviously don't have that as a rule any longer. So it evolves. It's evolving right in front of us. What we're seeing through spoken language, through written language that's more conversational, so like messaging and the communities we live in, and whatever words are the words that we use and the structures that we use, influence both book grammar and grammar standards, or style guide standards, I should say. For people that are feeling scared of grammar and not knowing it, part of it is because, one, it wasn't taught to us effectively, and two, it's changing right in front of our eyes. And so I just wanted to lower the temperature on the feeling of, okay, grammar, and really write in a way that almost creates the feeling that we want in classrooms in this book.
I 100% agree with you with the fact that grammar has changed so much because so I used to grow up with Mills and Boon, which is the equivalent of like Harlequin, but it's the British version. If you look at like previous Mills and Boon novels, the majority of them were like published in the 1990s or like early 2000s. Do you know how many of them do not have periods at the end of the sentence? And I'm sitting there with my now 2026 brain and I'm like, where's the period? I feel grammar, sometimes people just think it's like a comma or a period. And it definitely, as you said, it's not. It's a style, it's a voice, it's everything like that.
Yes.
And so I love how you say that you really wanted to make your book fun because especially kids with TikTok, with Instagram, with Reels, with their short attention span, you need something to entertain them, to keep them focused and to actually teach them while doing it for the fun. And so when you do write about grammar, what balance do you aim for between clarity, practicality, and teacher friendliness?
We've actually laid out a structure, let's say, of lessons, or I prefer to call them experiences, because when it comes to lessons, we've been taught that you need to learn or master that by the end of the time that we have. But it's just an experience with grammar that will grow and snowball into deeper and deeper grammar know-how. It begins with getting curious. So let's give an example here of simple and compound sentences. So we'll ask partnerships or trios, that's key in all of this, in engagement, to look at a short list of simple sentences and compound sentences. And they've already been labeled. We're not asking for identification first. That traditionally has been the gatekeeper. I've probably said, but I've definitely heard people say, if they can't even identify nouns, how can they use them? Well, they're using nouns all the time. And so let's put that on the back burner, because identification will come, but it can't be the gatekeeper. So we start with already labeled groups of simple sentences and compound sentences. And we ask kids to look at them and discover or theorize what their similarities are, what their differences are, what they see about their relationship. And because it's in conversation and because they know they're making their best guess, that curiosity gets sparked. It doesn't feel punitive. It doesn't feel corrective. Each of these are about 10 minutes, by the way. The next experience would be mostly me. I would be showing how to combine two simple sentences into a compound sentence. And I'd have the steps on how to do it. That's the other part that I think makes for deeper engagement. We will, in traditional grammar approaches, it was like identify the compound sentences, now write compound sentences. But we didn't have a how-to. When I share the coordinating conjunctions, we give it the nickname fanboys because it's the acronym for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And then I show quickly a step-by-step on how to combine the two sentences using a fanboys. And then I turn it over to the students. I give them two simple sentences, and then out loud, they create with their partner, same partner as the day before, they create out loud compound sentences. And then this is my favorite part, perhaps. I've designed grammar manipulatives. And if you are not that familiar with them, they're usually associated with math. So they would be like shapes for geometry, cubes for building, equations, taking concepts that were mostly taught here into your hands to be able to learn it more kinesthetically. And so the day or the experience after learning explicitly how to create compound sentences, then partnerships are given something like, I might have multiple sentence strips of simple sentences and then cut those out and have a couple commas ready and have the fanboys cut out as well. And together, students will create compound sentences. Maybe write them down, label them, give themselves some tips on how to do it in their own writing in the future. And that kind of play in partnerships is engaging. It's not a game. There's no winners or losers because we're trying to undo shame in grammar instruction and really just push it out of possibilities. And when students play with grammar in that way, it's something creative and therefore collaborative, conversational. And that's the type of play that helps learning begin to stick even more. Another experience after that is reflection. So reflection is the stickiest glue for the brain. This is John Dewey, very famous educator from the early 1900s. He said, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And so when we pause and reflect and think, what do I know for sure now about simple and compound sentences? And what am I still curious about? And instantly we're just coming back to the curiosity. That curiosity, a little bit of explicit teaching and play with reflection is just a mighty combination of grammar learning that's turned instruction on its head, and yet no one notices when it's happening because it really is so good.
I love how those steps, going through all of those things, and correct me if I'm wrong or add to it if I am missing something. It feels like what you're really trying to do is help the students understand how to manipulate the words to develop their voice and express their creativity, and trying to bring that analytical brain and creative brain together, to work together.
Yes, 100%.
I love that so much, especially as a mother of a 5-year-old who is just starting to learn how to do her sounds and beginning words and things. And she's struggling, but she loves the math and she loves art. And so I'm going, I need to get a hold of these books and figure out how to get that language she's struggling with to come into these areas that she loves in the way that you're talking about. That just sounds amazing to me.
First of all, I have a ton of free resources on my website that are downloadable, that are also like in article form, that give great places to start. And I would also say that just pausing and studying, meaning look closely at language that was chosen in the order of the words that they were chosen in a piece of reading, just to start to look at grammar with an eye for the artistry of it. I just read Theo of Golden. It's becoming very popular now. It's such a beautiful novel. It's about what could happen if kindness was the center of all things. And the way that this author wrote, I had to stop and just like take a breath because it was so beautiful, and just find the awe in the art that comes from writers. I think that's a nice first step, is to just admire.
I love that. That is beautiful because grammar is part of writing, grammar is part of storytelling. And if you can see the beauty in that, I think when you do read and you do learn about grammar, it's going to be more joyful. But then that kind of makes me wonder though, naturally in every language, you do have different grammar and you have different pauses and different phrases and things like that. So, I mean, yes, I do speak English and generally I understand the general concept of like grammar and punctuation and compound sentences. What would you recommend to teachers how to differentiate grammar instructions to those students who are multilingual?
In those partnerships that I was just talking about, that they would get curious about something, they would hear explicitly how to create it, then there's that time to play and reflect, that multilingual learners are part of those conversations. If they're newer to English, that they would be a third in a trio, so that kind of conversational language is the language that is the entry point to more accurate grammar. And so it's a win-win when a multilingual learner is in conversation with peers, or at least observing or gesturing or in some way being part of the conversation at whatever proficiency they might have at that new language, and knowing that writing is the last frontier, as they say, for those who are learning a new language. So we differentiate by creating lessons that are already expansive enough and conversation that is mostly from the students, that will support all levels of proficiency.
I totally agree with that because I don't know about the two of you, but for me, I despised it the most in school when you sit and you had to read How to Kill a Mockingbird, and then the teacher is like, okay, Johanna, your turn to read, and you're like, pardon? Like, I did not prepare for this. Especially for people who do not have English as a first language, like that's kind of an extra, I almost want to say obstacle and negativity that they connect with grammar and with writing. And so I love how you say that when you put them in a group of three, then they don't feel as pressured or they don't feel as judged when they don't have the grammar correct because they learn from their peers and their peers can encourage them to actually want to learn more and want to improve their writing and their grammar. How would you help a teacher that is kind of reluctant to teach grammar because they feel insecure about teaching it because they themselves don't know much about that? Like, how would you empower them?
I would first start with those mind shifts that I talked about earlier. The majority of people do not know grammar well, and that includes educators. And I did some of my own anecdotal research and asked both face to face and like on social media, what is the hardest part of teaching grammar, or what are the hardest parts? And by far, the number one hardest parts that came up was, I don't know grammar, so how am I going to teach it? That is a club that most of us are in, yet there's always a voice in our heads or even said aloud to us that are really saying, of course you need to know grammar. Of course you need to know everything. I assume that you do because you're an educator. I assume that you do because you're a writer. Um, it's it's just simply not true. And so I'd ask that teacher to take a deep breath and realize that every experience with grammar is building grammar know-how for more than just the students. And if I could speak to my book for a second, my co-author, Tim Donahue, is the most grammatically knowledgeable person I've ever met in my life. And what he did for our book was the fourth section of it. It's all a grammar refresher. So he explains grammar to teachers in a way that makes sense. He has a gift for that. He was actually a supervisor in a school that I was working with, and we were creating a grammar curriculum, and he was teaching us grammar. These are all English language arts teachers. And all of a sudden, we're having these complete aha moments when he's explaining grammar. We're like, I never thought of that. I didn't know that. I was doing the instructional practice side of things. So you learned it this way through Tim because you've had this background. It just is now solidifying. Here are instructional practices that you can use that will engage kids in a slower pace of learning these grammatical concepts. And then I would suggest to the teacher in grades 2 and up, so like 7 years old and up, that they would get to know simple, compound, and complex sentences. And having the knowledge of simple, compound, and complex sentences is so helpful as a teacher. It's not hard to learn, but we won't be learning them through identification. We'll be learning them through how are they constructed? What are the ingredients? And when we know the structure and the ingredients, then we're able to support students at the sentence level. And that's where research has shown is the best place to teach grammar.
One of the things you were telling us was that you want the teachers to realize that they can continue to learn how to teach the grammar themselves. It's a lifelong journey. I feel like my daughter, one of the issues that she has is the first 3 years of her life were spent in Spain, where the primary language was Spanish. And now we've brought her back to the United States, where the primary language is English. And her grammar is backwards, and she's starting to realize that even when she speaks in English, she uses that Spanish way of organizing her sentences. You can learn how to do grammar in both languages simultaneously because it's just learning different ways to play with the grammar. So what kinds of tools, routines, and frameworks do you feel like is most transformative for all types of language speakers?
I really think just natural conversation with the manipulatives. I have so many different types of manipulatives, but I want to say I have a different approach in grammar for little ones. So for like K and 1, pre-grammar, and then starting to wrap our heads around grammar, I have an entirely different approach. So this is where what I've put together here is really for those who have had enough, say, book language in their brains. And that includes multilingual learners because they'll have had ideally book language if they attended school at any point or were read to. I know that there are students that come with multiple sets of challenges as multilingual learners, including not having been educated in a home country. Still, that collaborative conversation, using manipulatives, talking it through. So, for example, if you take a sentence from one of your favorite books, could be your own books, and that you open up a doc, type that sentence in really large font, or you could have more than one sentence, cut out each word and each piece of punctuation, and challenge yourselves to, with, this could be with your child, this could be in the classroom, but see how many sentences you can make from that one sentence. And you can reuse the words and reuse the punctuation as many times as you want to. And right there is just some playful conversational practice that is, I'm thinking about your daughter, is practicing the English construction of sentences. I don't want her to lose the Spanish because it's such a gift to have more than one language, and her brain and kids' brains at that age are just so plastic, like they're so ready for learning. And so I want both. So you might do some practicing Spanish sentences and practicing with English sentences and comparing the two. So you're looking at that cross-linguistic transfer, and also stating the sentence in English the way that she meant it, not as a correction, maybe as a question. So let's say she says something using English words but a Spanish construction. We can simply respond with, "Did you mean," and then add it or share it in the proper construction. Not correction, just overriding.
I love that. That is so smart. Also, side note, I feel you should start a Scrabble board game with words that you mix around so that you can make sentences.
Ah,
I feel that
yes.
should be your next
I
adventure.
I love it. I love it. I have so many things that I have discovered post publication, and that is a great idea. Oh my gosh.
Nell is so imaginative, and she loves board games, so she'd absolutely come up with something
Ah,
like that. As we are tying up our conversation here, I want to ask you if there is a teacher or a parent or someone trying to teach their child how to love writing. What is the most important message that you want them to take away from listening to this?
for writing specifically, I would love nothing more than to point out the strengths in their children's writing. Stop the correction mode. Say, this is strong because this is strong because this is strong. And that's important because this is how it functions. And then if we want to add some feedback, to phrase it in a way that it is so, it's just an opportunity. So because you were able to write all of those words down, you're now ready to use punctuation. Like it's just like an invitation. So how we respond to students writing to show the art that's already there and what that does for you as the reader, or what that does for a reader in general, and then offer a next step if that feels right. But knowing our strengths is essential.
I love everything that you have said today, Patty, and I wish that we had all day to just chat about the different things about grammar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it was so good to be here and talk to both of you.
I want to go buy your book so that I can actually educate myself and be a better writer and be a better storyteller and an imaginator. I feel I'm pretty imaginative.
If you, as our listener, are looking for more from Patty and want to find her books, go to www.pattymcgee.org and you can follow her on Instagram at PMGMcGee. We'll put all of those links in the show notes. We like to keep things short here on Tea and Tales. Get your fingers back on the keyboard and your pens back on paper.
And if you like what we are doing here and you love the guests that we have on and the topics that we are discussing, go follow us on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at Tea and Tales Podcast and on Twitter/X and TikTok at Podcast Details. And then to help us get up in the algorithm so that every writer in the entire world can learn about us and learn about this industry and help their craft, go to that purple icon on your device and go give us 5 stars and comment on how much you love this episode. Comment on how nice my earrings are or the cool pot plant behind Sarah. And then you can help us go up. It's a moment.
And join us next week for our Agent Spotlight with Sarah Megabo. Also, go and look at our social medias and see how you can enter the drawing for a free blurb review from Jessie Cuniff. And we're focusing on those young adult, middle grade, and children's book blurbs for either your query or the back of your book. So join us there and get into that drawing. Happy writing!
Bye!